So we've logged into the Portal Azure website here, and as you can see, I've got a subscription called Coria website, and I have no resources here, and we're going to actually go through the process of installing the XM0 Sitecore Azure Web Apps for version 8.2 Update 1. So clean slate, as you can see, no resources in my subscription. So the first thing we're going to click on is the new button here. And I want to actually search the marketplace. We're going to start typing for Sitecore. You'll see that doing a search for Sitecore will actually reveal the Sitecore Web Experience Manager 8.2. So I'm going to click on that, and then you'll see that we have some marketing language. We got our nice little screen here, and when it's all said and done, we are actually able to click on this Create button. Clicking on the Create button will actually reveal the next set of questions that it's going to ask you. One is the app name. So I'm actually going to call this the Coria Web Example. I'm going to call it the Coria Web Example. Now I'm going to show you something kind of interesting. Notice how I used all lowercase letters. Watch what happens if you try to use an uppercase letter. Well, for some reason, Azure doesn't actually like uppercase letters in the app name. So we're going to keep it to lowercase. We're going to call it Coria Web Example. You can see here that I have a Coria subscription already selected. And if you had an existing resource group, you can actually create this in an existing resource group. Because this is a new subscription, I'm actually going to create it into a new one. And we're going to call this resource group the Coria website. The next option here is actually the East US location. You'll notice that this has a whole bunch of options in it. We have Australia East, Brazil South, you've got North Europe, West Europe, you've got all the parts of the US, you even have Japan West. This is the ability for us to install any one of these web apps into any one of these data centers for Azure, and we know that it's going to work. Only data centers that are approved for use with Sitecore Web Experience 8.2 is actually going to be listed here. So for our purposes, because we're located on the east side of the US, I'm going to click on East US. Next, we're going to click on the SQL database. Now, this is really just setting up the Azure SQL web app database. And the idea here is we just need to have some kind of username and password that allows us to admin the SQL database. So for this particular one, I'm just going to use the good old SQL admin username. And because I really believe in strong password security, this password is actually going to be called password. Nope, I can't do that. It's got to be uppercase, lowercase, and numbers. So we're actually going to do uppercase password with a 1. And you'll see a little green check mark tells me that the password is good. Now, if I haven't been too absent-minded, you'll see that I've typed the correct password. And now I have a green check mark, and I'm going to press the OK button here. Pressing the OK button here will actually, no, Google, I don't want to save that, will actually now show that the SQL database is configured. The next thing that we're going to configure here is actually the Sitecore settings. The Sitecore settings are the Sitecore admin password. For any of the Sitecore experienced devs out there, the affectionate admin B password does not work here. So we have to think of a little bit more stringent of a password. So the password I'm going to use is actually going to be password. I know, creative, right? You'll see that just password is the check mark, and I'm going to type password again, and we get a check mark. The next thing that we have to actually locate here is a license file. So now that I've put my license file in here, I'm going to go ahead and press the OK button, and now you'll see that the Sitecore settings are configured. Last but not least, we have the legal terms. Now, as any good product has, a bunch of legalese that you're supposed to read through. We are loading this information, and basically this is going to show you in no uncertain terms kind of what it's going to cost to install the Sitecore Web Experience Manager 8.2. Now this is the out of the box implementation, and I'll kind of walk through this a little bit. You'll see that the first thing we're getting here is 2 app service plans under the standard S1 tier. You'll see here that we're actually getting 2 instances. We're getting 2 instances because we have a CM server and we have a CD server, content management and content delivery. For the SQL database under standard S1, you'll see that we're actually putting in 3 instances. Now, this is the Azure SQL Server database, and we have 3 instances because starting off, we're actually installing 3 databases. We have the Sitecore Core database, the Sitecore Master database, and the Sitecore Web database. Next, we have the Azure Search. Now, this is one of the first implementations out of the box for Sitecore, implementing Microsoft's Azure Search mechanism. It's their own branded Azure Search, kind of like Solar, if people are used to Solar, or even Coveo, if you're used to Coveo. Azure Search is a layer of search mechanism that sits actually behind the scenes on Elasticsearch. It's really just Elasticsearch running in the background. We don't have access through the Azure Search to the Elasticsearch API. We have to use the Azure Search API. But what this is also saying is this is going to install 1 instance of the Azure Search standard S1 tier. Last but certainly not least, and also very new, is we're also installing a Redis cache instance, basic C0. You can see it's 2 cents an hour, not too bad. The Redis cache is being used for the session state management. Typically in these scenarios, session state is handled by MongoDB. Currently, as of Sitecore 8.2 Update 1, the out-of-the-box marketplace installation of this Web Experience Manager does not include XDB, and therefore does not have a MongoDB set up. If you wanted to have XDB, you would have to actually bring your own Mongo and attach it to the resource group. So we're using Redis cache for the session management. In terms of use, if you agree to everything, then we just click the purchase button here. The purchase button will basically come back and say, okay, yep, the legal terms are accepted. We have our Sitecore settings configured. We have our SQL database configured. Got everything set, our app name, our subscription. So last but not least, we can click this OK button. But before I do, I want to also dig into the automation options. So if anybody's used to the way that Azure does things, Azure has a really nice portal that you see here that can do the majority of the functions that you need. However, it also has a pretty powerful PowerShell implementation. And one of the things that it actually can run is what's called Azure Resource Management Templates, or ARM templates. So when you look at the automation tools, what you can actually see is these are the built ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager templates. These are the actual templates that the process is going to run to install this implementation. What's nice about this is we can go through here, we can actually see what it's doing, and if we wanted to, we could actually export this out, modify it for our own uses, and then use it to build up this in this environment. Now, that's a little bit more than I want to get into for this demo. So what we're going to do is click the X button here. It's just going to take us back to our nice little menu button here. And we're going to press the OK button. We are now done. So the OK button goes, and all of a sudden Azure says we are initializing deployment. And you can see here it is 2:39 p.m. in the East US. So now we're deploying. So what now? Well, first off, this deploy takes about 25 minutes to about 30 minutes to actually completely finish. As you see here, not much is in the display for the resources. However, as we go along and we click on resource group, you can see, oh, suddenly the resource group has been built. And if you click on the resource group, you start to see that, hey, we have actual items that are being created. Already, we have 6 items, and if I refresh this again, I bet we have more. See, we have 7 now. So as you can tell, behind the scenes, Azure is actually doing this full-on deployment. So there's not much that I can do here while the deployment is going on. But what I can do is kind of walk you through some of the things that might be new and some explanation on some things. First off, the first thing you're going to see here is we have a Coria Web Example Application Insights AI. Application Insights is Microsoft Azure's answer to web application monitoring. If you're used to programs like New Relic or App Dynamics, Application Insights is the same thing. It's basically monitoring the web application. It's going to report back any errors. It's going to report back any issues that the website's having. You can also get utilization, and it also provides the logging mechanism. Now, I mentioned the logging mechanism because, well, Sitecore has changed it up quite a bit. One of the, I don't want to say cons of using web app is you don't have the ability to really have direct file access. You do. You can FTP stuff, you can deploy stuff, you have file access per se, but as the web app is running, it's not intended to have heavy disk usage. It's just the files are there running in memory. So what Sitecore has done is instead of using Log4net and outputting the logs to files like we've been used to for the last 10 years, they have changed it and now are using a brand new adapter for their logging, Sitecore.logging, for application insights. And so what that means is now when log files are generating, they're actually generating as trace entries in application insights. And I can't click on this yet because the deployment's not done. But let's see what happens. I'm going to click on it, and we're going to kind of get in here the overview. You're going to see that there's a live stream. There's really not much to collect here because nothing is running. But if you were to actually click on this while it's running, you can actually see the live stream. The live stream is going to show you all the active user connections happening. You can click on analytics and hold on, we're loading. Click on analytics and get all the analytics that you need from application insights here. Again, there's nothing to see here because there's really not much going on with this particular application. But the traces are really what I was talking about here. So here you have traces, and these are going to show you your individual log, your individual logging. You can see your custom events, your page views, really nice features for actual analytics through the application insights. It's impressive to see once you start seeing an active website in use. So we're still generating. I'm going to refresh the page here. You see we're up to 9 items now. When it's all said and done, I believe there's like 15 or 16 items complete. So we're going to just refresh here. So the next thing is we talked a little bit about the application insights. The next thing that we're going to review is the search service. You'll see here that this is the Azure search resource. And if I click on it, you'll see that we have the URL. It's actually running, so we know this is up and running. It can show you your document count, your storage count, all of your scales, your indexers, your data sources, your monitoring. Again, the website's not up and running yet, so there's nothing to see here. So it's really just a blank Azure search environment. But the indexes, as we start to index, you're going to start seeing the normal indexes that you're used to seeing: Sitecore Master, Sitecore Web, all the other individual indexes that Sitecore uses, you'll start to see here. Now, it was recently told to me during a Sitecore meeting that there is a limitation on the Azure Search indexer right now. And I don't know if it's a limitation because of Sitecore 8.2 or if it's a limitation of Azure Search in general. But the limitation, as I know it, is it's 1,000 fields per index. That may seem like a lot, but one thing I learned was that Coveo, for instance, the standard Sitecore index, Coveo is already looking at about 5,000 different fields. So when you think about that from a standpoint of Coveo is indexing almost 5,000 fields for the standard Sitecore index, 1,000 fields for the standard Sitecore index for Azure Search might actually seem a little bit small. So again, I don't know if that's a limitation from the Sitecore side or the Azure Search side, but that is something to keep in mind, is that there is that limitation. So then we're going to close out of that a little bit. You can also change the settings. You can add an index. You can import data, and you can also use the Search Explorer. And the Search Explorer allows you to actually, just like in Solar, allows you to enter in some kind of query string, and it'll show you all the different results coming out of it. So that's the Azure Search object. So next object we're going to look at is the app service. The app service is the web app service that's actually running the Sitecore website. This particular one is the content delivery server, and we know that because of the CD suffix here on the end. So I'm going to click on this, and you'll see that it is up and running. That's actually a nice thing. And you can see that we have 0 server errors. We've already had about 10 requests, and you can kind of see where those requests are coming from. We have 8 requests, 2 requests. And you have your FTP deployment username, and you have your FTP hostname. So these are examples of these deployment usernames. And you have the ability to stop the web service, to restart the web service. You also have the activity log. The activity log is going to show you what's happening. Here's one where it says, it updated the website, and you can see there's really not much. Updated website was initiated by me. So this allows you to kind of see what's going on with the service in terms of, it looks like there was one error. So I can look over here and see that the update to SQL Server errored. It looks like the subscription is not ready for operation because another operation is currently in process. Please wait a few minutes and then try the operation again. So this is probably part of the setup process that's actually going through. I've seen this message before, and we're just going to continue waiting because we're not actually done deploying the entire solution. So you can, the other thing you can go through, you can diagnose and solve problems. My app is running 500 errors, app is performing slowly. You also have, the nice thing is the new thing called deployment slots. If anybody's heard of the blue-green deployment scenario, where basically you have your production server running and it's on a certain code base, but you're ready to deploy a newer code base. Well, you would actually deploy that code base to the staging environment, get that running, and then basically flip the slots. And now your new code base is running, and to the user, it looks like nothing ever changed. So that's what these deployment slots are. The nice thing about deployment slots is Sitecore has decided that they're not going to charge for deployment slots. So we can actually have deployment slots without affecting the license, which is pretty nice, actually. You also have deployment options. You can configure all your deployment options here. I don't want to. You also have a continuous delivery, which is in preview mode. Little note about preview. Azure does things where they release new features kind of without notice or on the fly. And new features that they're kind of testing, they'll always put in like a preview. So this is a preview of the continuous delivery process that we can actually use with these web apps. So I'm going to click the refresh button here. We're still deploying, so you know that we're still going. We have about 9 items here. My experience has been that the longest thing to actually set up and deploy has been the actual databases. So now the next thing we have is the app service plan. The app service plan is always going to be a different resource, and it's always going to be for the app service. It's going to be in association with an app service. So you'll see here is that for this service plan, the CDHP, this app service plan is for this service. So if I click on it, you'll see that we have a couple different options here. First off, I get all my monitoring. So this is my CPU monitoring. You can see that we're only hitting about 55% memory usage and approximately 9% CPU usage. It's not being used, so it's expected that these would be pretty low. But the other thing you can do here is you can actually scale up and you can scale out. So if you wanted to, if the standard S1 configuration for a web app isn't sufficient for you, which is currently 1 core, about 1.75 gigs of RAM, you can actually scale up to either an S2 standard, an S3 standard, and Azure will actually show you kind of your estimated costs. Now, if you look at it, you really have, it can get pretty costly. You have the premium tier, you have the standard tier, and you have the basic tier. Well, I think, at least for me, my experience has been that the S2 standard tier is usually good enough for most content delivery environments. And I usually like using the S3 standard for most content management environments. But it really is dependent upon the code that you're running, not just the Sitecore code, but any kind of custom code that you might have on top of it. So it varies. We're going to keep it as 1 core, 1.75, but if your users complain about speed, it's running slow, you can always scale up. The next feature that's on this app service plan is actually the scale out service plan. Now, the scale out service plan is actually pretty impressive. You can say, hey, if the CPU percentage gets above 85%, then I want to scale up to 6 instances. So when the first instance gets above 85%, then it's going to scale up to the next. It's going to add 1 instance. When that instance gets to 85%, it's going to go to the next one, and so forth. So this is kind of your ability to edit the CPU range. And you can also have an email notification here for your system administrators to let them know that, hey, something is getting scaled out because of load. The reason why that's important is because this is actually, when you increase your instances, it's actually going to increase, basically double the cost that this app service is going to be for. Now, I'm not going to get into it. You can talk to your Sitecore rep about it. There may be a license implication on these instances to where you only have so many instances per license, but that's more of a license question that you'll want to talk to your Sitecore rep about. All right, so that's the app service plan. And you'll see here now we have the content management service, which is just another web app. You can see that it's running. We've got, looks like 12 requests going into it. Got our URL. I think we're still deploying, so I'm not really wanting to click too much into that. And so then the next thing you'll see is we actually have the Redis cache. So the Redis cache is a cache service through Azure that comes out of the box set up for session state management. That's really all that it's set up for currently. If anybody's familiar with Sitecore caching, Sitecore caching, as of actually Sitecore 8.2, they have made it possible for you to switch out the cache mechanism that Sitecore uses for caching. In this particular environment, installing from the marketplace, the cache that's running is actually the out-of-the-box default Sitecore cache management. However, I do think it's possible to change it to Redis cache and actually use this Redis cache service to run your Sitecore caching. I'm not going to cover that in this video, but in a future video down the road, I will showcase how to actually change your cache from using the Sitecore cache to using an Azure Redis cache. Again, here we have the Redis cache, you can actually see here that it's in the status creating, so it's not quite done yet. You can see our pricing tier is pretty basic at 250 megs. If this was running, you could see the hits and misses, the gets and sets, and what our memory usage was. It's pretty powerful what you can actually get out of it, but it is still creating, so there's really not much that we can do here with this. You also have the ability for like the advanced settings, Redis cache advisors, and also the ability to import and export your data. All right, so I'm going to do another refresh here. You see we're still at 9 items, and you can see that we have a SQL server and we have a SQL database. So you'll see what's interesting about this is that we have a SQL server called Web, and the Web SQL server has a web database. The reason why is because the way that Sitecore built this ARM template to build this out, it's actually allowing the Web SQL server to be independent for the purpose of the content delivery server, so that those two devices can operate kind of alone and not be impacted by the other device. And what's not showing here, because it's not created yet, is actually the CM SQL server and then the core and master databases. So we're going to let this run for a few more minutes, and then we'll come back. So we'll cut to the commercial break, and then we'll be right back. Talk to you later. All right, and we're back. So that little break in between allowed us some time to let the deployment finish, and it took about 30 minutes to run, and now we're back. And as you can see here on the screen, the deployment has succeeded. We have our Choreo website, and we have all of our items. It looks like 12 items are actually created. So now to actually get to our Sitecore server, we have the CM and the CD, and you have the URL is actually up here in the it's actually up here. So clicking on this actually will open it up in a new tab, and you can see here we have the Sitecore Experience platform shows up. You can log in to Sitecore, and you can see that Sitecore's Launchpad loads. We have the desktop, and you can actually open up Content Editor. Thing to note here is we're operating off of that standard S1 web app tier. It's actually running pretty fast, all things considered. 8.2 definitely helps with the speed of Sitecore. As you can see here, the content editor takes a little bit of time to load initially. This is the first time I've loaded the content editor, and it's loading all the icons. You can see there's a little bit of slowness here. But what's interesting is as we open things, and if I were to go back to the Launchpad, and then go back to the desktop, and then go back to Content Editor, what you're seeing is everything actually loads much faster because everything is in that cache. All the DLLs have loaded into the memory, and things are running pretty fast. And this is the CM version. So we also have the content delivery service. And I'm going to click on here, and you can see we have the CD version. And the one thing I just wanted to showcase for you is this is an actual true content delivery server, and it's already been hardened. If you try to go to Sitecore, it will actually error out on you and say, sorry, can't get to Sitecore. We don't have permissions to view this directory or page. So there you go. We now have a vanilla version of Sitecore 8.2 Update 1 running in an Azure Web App service. We have our application insights, which I would go into once we were done. I'll quickly take a look at that. You can see the overview. And you can see all of our stats are starting to collect. We've already had about 220 server requests. That's me working through the content editor. We've had a server response time of about 458 milliseconds, which is actually pretty good. And you can see that we actually have a live stream running. These are the incoming requests. So if I was to go over here and kind of refresh these pages and do stuff in here and open up the content editor, you're actually seeing these requests come through in real time. You can see the request per second, duration. It's really pretty amazing what you can get out of application insights. So there you go. We have a fully functioning Sitecore implementation on Azure Web Apps. We have a CM and a CD, and we have our SQL servers and our Redis cache. Up next is to add XDB, but that's for another time. I'm Pete with Coria. Thanks for listening.